Just a few minutes after Vanessa had taken her seat, Mike's awkwardness had returned in spades. Vanessa's had as well. If her fixed attention on her menu for a full 2 minutes was any indicator, Mike had his menu open as well, but he wasn't really looking at it. If someone had put a gun to his head, he wouldn't even able to tell them even one single item on the menu. Giving up, Mike raised his eyes and looked at Vanessa. She lifted her gaze at the exact same time. Vanessa quirked her lips in a caught me expression, so this is what it's like, she said. Mike raised an eyebrow. What? Vanessa closed her menu. She was now appeared to be focused only on Mike, being normal. Is that what we're doing? Mike closed his menu, too. I think we're doing pretty good, considering what we've been through, Vanessa said. Mike's brain unhelpfully took him to a quick trip on Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Memory Land. He blinked to wipe away the images. I just had too much time on my hands, Vanessa said. Conservating isn't for sissies, she grinned. I'll be better when I get back to work. I think you're doing great, Mike said. He wanted to reach out and touch Vanessa's hand, but he didn't have the nerve. He cleared out his throat instead. Didn't you say you signed up for the bike classes or something like that? Spin class, Vanessa lit up a little. I've been going for a couple of weeks. Even made some friends. Mike mock widened his eyes. Friends? Whoa, what are those? They grinned at each other. Their tension went down a notch. However, when the server appeared with a sweaty crystal water pitcher and top of the water goblets, which was only a half-inch from full, Mike's comfort level up again. The server beamed at Vanessa. Good evening, ma'am. He nodded at Mike as if to acknowledge that Mike, sir, had already received his greetings earlier. The server gestured at the closed menus. You'll find today's specials at the front of the menu. Can I tell you about some of our signature dishes? Hell no, Mike thought. But he said, can you give us a few more minutes? Of course. The server's answer was smoothly delivered, but Mike noted the impatient undercurrent. Mike watched the vested waiter leave. He returned his attention to Vanessa. You look great, by the way. Mike inwardly cringed. He could have said that better. So do you, Vanessa said. Whereas Mike's compliment had shot out casually, Vanessa's response sounded genuine. There was no mistake the attraction in her words. Mike immediately lost his ability to breathe. He could feel his cheeks caught fire, and he knew he was turning noticeably red. Mike struggled to come to terms with the truth. He got his respirations working again as he muttered under his breath, This is a date. Vanessa leaned forward. What was that? Mike grabbed for his water. Nothing. I just said it was a beautiful day. Vanessa smiled. Her gaze went to Mike's tie. Let me guess, she said. Abby tied it for you? Mike's cheeks had gotten hotter. He was probably turning the color of the tomatoes in their fellow diner's salad. He paused and nodded his neck. How is she? Vanessa asked. Mike jumped on the change of subject. Abby is, well, you know. Some days are good, some days she still misses them. Her friends. I don't know what to tell her. Vanessa put her elbows on the table and popped her chin on her hand. Her gaze on Mike's was like a tractor beam drawing him in. I know you're trying to protect her, Mike, Vanessa said, but this story that they're broken, that you're going to fix those animatronics somehow, it's only giving her false hope. I think you should be honest with her. Mike instantly went from awkward to angry. Honest? He snapped. Vanessa dropped her arms and leaned back. What? Mike lightened his tone. Nothing. Vanessa had known Mike was tense for the second she spotted him in the cozy corner booth. The way he looked reminded her of the way boys had always looked at school dances. It was a state of full-on conflict. They wanted to jump in and flee, both at the same time. Now, though, Mike's man-on-a-date stiffness had turned into something else. He was upset. Vanessa could tell something was bugging him, but she didn't know what it was, and she was afraid to ask. To fill the uncomfortable silence, Vanessa reached for the bread basket and pulled out a slice of crusty baguette. Not bothering with the butter, which looked frozen solid, she took a bite. Breadcrumbs felt like rain over her menu. As if appearing from thin air, the server reached discreetly over Vanessa's shoulder and swept the crumbs in his open hand. Pardon my reach, madame, the server said. He dipped his hand and drifted away. What the heck? Vanessa's glance at Mike communicating her surprise. He cracked a smile. Yeah, they do that here. Several seconds of squirming silence. Vanessa couldn't stand it. She decided to return to what they'd been talking about before Mike had gotten weird. Abby's stronger than you think, Vanessa said. Mike nodded. I guess I haven't figured out how to talk to her yet. He shrugged. But I will. Mike shifted. The bulging muscle in front of his ear made it clear he wanted to change the subject. Vanessa tried to come up with something to say, but Mike beat her to it. Want to tell me about your bad dream? He asked. Now Vanessa was wriggling in her seat. As much as Mike obviously didn't want to talk about Abby and the animatronics, Vanessa didn't want to talk about her dream. She waved a hand as if she could swat the subject away. It's always the same. We don't need to talk about it. Mike apparently did. Your dad, he asked. Vanessa sighed. She looked at the nearby window. The streetlights in this part of town were few and far between. No cars were passing outside, and neighboring businesses were closed, so it's dark outside. The bistro, the sun, and she suddenly wanted to run out the darkness and disappear. Look, Mike said. I was thinking. Vanessa returned her gaze to Mike. She kept her expression blank, but her stomach was clenching. She really didn't want to know what Mike was thinking. Remember how I used my dreams to confront what happened to Garrett? Mike asked. Vanessa tilted her head and gave Mike a slit-eye look. Where was he going with this? I admit, I probably slept too much, for a long time, but it helped me. Mike put his hand on the table, and I think it could help you too. Help with what? Vanessa asked in spite of herself. Confronting him. Your dad. Vanessa immediately began shaking her head. She was instantly in a state of hypervigilance. Her breath quickened. She had to gasp her hands together to keep them from trembling. I don't think that's a good idea, Vanessa managed to say. Just once, Mike said. You'll probably have to do it just once. Vanessa shook her head, even more empathetically. Her mouth was suddenly dry, but she didn't trust herself to touch the water glass without revealing her trembling fingers. You'll never be free of your dad until you deal with some of the mess he left inside your head, Mike persisted. Vanessa felt herself nodding. She had to admit he was right about it. Without thinking, she said, just because he's dead doesn't mean he'll let me go. The second the words were out, Vanessa regretted them. The look on Mike's face made it clear that she just creeped him out, big time. Mike's crow feet planted and his lips pressed on a thin line. Vanessa thought Mike would push her to explain what she meant, but instead he sounded gentle when he said, You and I have come a long way since what happened, but we'll never... Mike raised his gaze, and Vanessa had the courage to look directly in his eye. There, she saw more emotion than she had ever seen in him before. What emotion exactly? Vanessa leaned in, trying to decipher the intense focus in his gaze. Mike blinked and his eyes moistened. Vanessa understood then. She was seeing desperation, plus both grief and anguish. Feelings Mike clearly kept buried deep beneath his usual nonchalance. Vanessa wasn't sure what to say to him, but she wasn't sure she was ready for such transparent connection. Mike spoke before she had time to respond. I just want us to be able to move past this. Mike looked down. All of us. Vanessa thought about Abby. She was sure that's who Mike was talking about, and she had to admit that if she wanted to be in Mike and Abby's life, if she did, she was going to have to deal with some of her nuances. You can do this, Mike said as if reading her mind. Mike chewed on the inside of her lip. Then she felt a smile creep up on her. Was that optimism? It felt like it. Vanessa really wanted to believe in herself the way Mike seemed to believe in her, but could she? Mike was relieved to get home. Not that the date had been bad. After a rocky start, he and Vanessa had settled in, mostly. They finally ordered, and they, in unspoken agreement, abandoned the heavy topics and stuck in light banters as they eaten some kind of beef dish that was more elegant than satisfying. Mike had never thought art belonged on dinner plates. He wanted to eat his food, not admire it. He and Vanessa had shared a bunch of jokes about upscale cuisines then, and the rest of the meal actually had been pretty fun. Mike entered his house and let the door swing shut behind him. He paused to take a breather. Facing the fact that under the fun, there has been a current of tension between him and Vanessa. Would it always be there? Mike set aside the question for another time as he walked in the kitchen and dropped his keys on the table. He looked down the hall towards Abby's door. No light shone from under it, but he figured she was still up. Abby? Mike got no response. Maybe she was asleep. He headed towards her room and pushed her door open. Abby's nightlight spilled a yellow glow across her pillow, which was empty. No Abby. He scanned her room. Unless she was hiding in the closet, which was ridiculous, she wasn't there. Mike back in the hall. He looked towards the open bathroom door. Abs? Mike eased the bathroom door open. It only took a microsecond to see what the cramped room was empty, and just a few more seconds revealed the entire house to be empty. After checking both his closet and Abby's, why she'd be in that closet that she didn't know, but he looked anyway. Marge charged back at the kitchen and looked around as if cabinets or the fridge might give him the answers. Where was Abby? Mike's pulse began pounding in the head like a marching band bass drum section, the rich meal he had consumed burbling around his stomach. He pulled out his phone, But Mike's frequent jerking gaze landed on his keys, and inches from his keys, camouflaged by the stack of mail, there was a folded piece of paper. Mike snatched it up and opened it. And Abby's uneven scrawl, in green colored pencil, Abby had written, "Gone to fix my friends." Mike closed his eyes and exhaled, long and slow. This was better than some of the worst case scenarios that had been scrolling through his brain. Barely, or maybe not. This was not something Mike had wanted to face tonight, or ever. But now he had to. He took a deep breath and picked up his keys. Mike let Freddy Fazbear's Pizza's double doors thud close behind him as he entered the familiar building. He walked through the lobby, listened to his footsteps to echo on the black and white tiled floor. Only dim security lights was on, so the hallway to his right was barely visible. A little illumination, however, reached towards him through the archway leading to the dining room. Heading that way, he inhaled the musty, dusty odor of the place that was etched so deeply in his memory vault. Everything looks the same, Mike thought as he stepped into the dining room. Almost everything. Mike looked at the same stacks of tables and chairs, the same structured party favors, the same wall of drawings, the same heavy red stage curtains, but there, on the stage, his gaze faltered. Here was the one difference, the stage. Both the main area and Foxy's smaller platform of the side was completely bare. The animatronics, the heart of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, were gone. Mike looked towards Abby, who he spotted the second he passed through the archway. She was impossible to miss, sitting cross-legged, alone on the floor in the middle of the room. Abby looked like the spotlight star of the tragic play, her backpack and bike helmet on her side. Abby was hunched over and her head was bowed. Wanting to both yell at Abby and hug her fiercely, Mike kept his pace sedate and calm as he walked toward his sister. He paused for a couple seconds to look down at her, dropping head. She didn't glance up. Mike sighed and lowered himself to the floor, grunting as he pulled his legs in a position to match Abby's. The dust on the floor puffed upward. Mike suppressed a cough. Abby still didn't look at him, so Mike just sat there for at least a minute. They shared a building silent hush. Finally, Mike said, "Abby, we need to go." No response. "We can't be here," he told her. Abby lifted her head, and Mike could tell she's been crying for a very long time. Her eyelids were so puffy that they were barely open, and the whites in Abby's eyes were bloodshot. She blinked at Mike, and her gaze was accusatory. "Where are they?" Mike looked towards the bar stage. "I'm so sorry, Abs, but..." "Where are they?" Mike shook his head. "I don't know, Abs." When he squinted her to believe at him, he held out both hands and palms up. "Really, I don't know. Maybe they went to heaven. Your friends. Wouldn't you want that for them?" Abby looked at her feet. She made a face. "Yeah, I guess so." Mike could see Abby thinking about it. He waited. Finally, she nodded and said genuinely, "Yes." Mike reached out and took Abby's hand. "I'm sorry. I should have told you sooner." "Yeah, you should have." Abby didn't sound angry, just resigned. "But hey, you know what?" Mike said with fierce cheer. Abby gave him a side-eyed look. "Your friends aren't gone. They're still right here." Mike pointed at Abby's heart. Abby immediately rolled her eyes. "That's really corny." Mike couldn't help it. He laughed. "Really corny," Abby emphasized. Mike laughed harder, and Abby finally cracked a hint of a smile. Mike took advantage of the shift in Abby's mood. "Hey," he said, "follow me." Mike pushed off the floor and stood. He held out his hand. Abby took it. As soon as he helped her up, he strolled with her through the dining room towards the arcade. The old prize counter, dusty and filled with abandoned toys and snacks and gadgets, stretched along the outer edge of the rows of video games. Mike pulled Abby towards it. Once there, he took a position behind the counter and threw up his arms. "Okay, young lady," Mike boomed in a Jones Aaron's dream, Jolser Imish tone. "You have 1,000,000 tickets." Mike pretended to unfurl the windless roll of invisible tickets. "Pick your prize." Abby gave Mike a really look. She glanced up at the ceiling like some equivalent invisible angel might come down and save her from her goofy brother. Mike ignored Abby's less than enthusiastic reception and his cheerful efforts. He scanned the prize and pointed at the package of candy. "How about some of these orange gummy candy things?" Abby curled her lip at the crusty, pusty package. "How old are these?" Mike plucked the candy from the counter. The cellular crinkled as he checked the label. He frowned. "Yikes." He dropped the candy, which landed on the crunchy thumb. "Okay," he said. "Let's try again. How about..." Mike rummaged through the Fossum and Jessam and old arcade treasures. Abby watched Mike idly, her gaze scanning the bibs and bobs that Mike was scuffing about. Then she spotted something. At the far edge of the prize counter, pressed against the glass and partly buried under the pile of plush toys and plastic doodads, something was glowing. For the first time since Mike had started his Make Abby Feel Better skit, Abby was interested. Mike hadn't noticed what Abby had seen. He was distracted by other toys. I got it, Mike crowed. He plucked a plush Freddy from a mound of hoots. He held it for Abby to examine. She went along with Mike's efforts just to make him feel good, and she studied the bear. The small brown bear was a little freaky. Its eyes were aimed in the opposite direction from each other, and its fur was matted and tangled with cobwebs. Mike squeezed the bear, and they apparently activated an old squeaker box. Stacky singing from the bear's belly. The bear sang, "Hor, hor, 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 hor," to the tune of a tortoise march. Abby glared at Mike and shook her head. Maybe not, Mike agreed. Abby returned her attention to what she'd just seen. The glow was still there, but Abby couldn't make out what was coming from. She stepped in the end of the counter and kneeled in front of the pile of prizes that was buried, whatever it was. The glow went out. Intrigued, Abby shifted her position so she reached in behind the glass and root through the layers of toys buried the source of the glow. She started shoving things aside. Movements at the other end of the counter caught her eye, and she looked that way. It was Mike, still staring at the bear. Abby almost laughed at Mike's horrid expression. He shook her head when he tossed the bear aside. As it arched through the air, the bear screeched out a final extended "Roar." Abby returned to her own execution project. Even though the object of her search wasn't glowing anymore, she remembered where it was, and she thought she was close. Mike stepped over when he saw Abby digging for the prizes. "What'd you find?" he asked. Abby's hand crossed over a blocky and hard shape. He pulled, and she plucked free something in plastic packaging. She wiped grim at the package and peered what was within. It looked some kind of clunky animatronic device, very 80s looking, squarish and garnished. Abby couldn't tell what it was. She wiped the package again. She tilted and looked at the faded label. "Freddy Faz Talker," she read. Abby straightened and Mike stepped over her side. He peered over the shoulder. "Looks pretty high-tech," he said. "Can I see?" Abby hesitated, then handed Mike what she found. He took it and flipped it around to see the back of the label. "Realistic voice interaction," he asked. "Talk to us any time." Mike looked at Abby. "Has the young lady perhaps found something she would like?" Abby relented and gave Mike a smile. She reached out and snatched the package back from Mike. "Yes, fine, I want it." Mike grinned and handed Abby the fast talker. He looked ridiculous, pleased with himself. "Sold," Mike shouted, "for 1,000,000 tickets." Abby shook her head at Mike's silliness as she peeled apart the package and took out the old little device inside. She tossed the packaging back behind the counter. "Come on," Mike said. "Let's go home." Mike threw an arm around Abby's shoulder. Together, they walked away from the prize counter. They returned to the middle of the room, picked up Abby's stuff, and headed towards the lobby. "I thought you liked orange gummy candy," Mike said as their footsteps scuffled across the tile floor. "I did," Abby agreed, "until I ate that whole bag at Christmas and threw up." Mike made a choking sound. "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." He wrinkled his nose. "It was like an orange slime waterfall." Abby temped at her gag reflex. "Don't remind me." Outside, Mike had Abby tucked in the cabin of his truck. He watched her click her seatbelt in place and begin fiddling with her new toy. Then he headed back to the pizzeria entrance where Abby had left her bike. Grabbing it, she was about to wheel away with the building when, out of the corner of his eye, he saw something fluttering. Turning, he heard a rustle then. Papers whispered in the night slight breeze. They were flyers, a few dozen of them. Mike walked over to the flyer and squinted to read it in the pale moonlight that reached feeble across the trees that surrounded Freddy's parking lot. "Oh, Fast Fest," the flyers advertised the annoying celebration of all things Freddy. Not impressed, Mike's gaze barely scanned the flyers. They were all the same, bright red lettering over the image of 4 animatronics. Mike started back towards Abby's bike, but then something jumped out of him. It was one word, scrawled on one of the flyers, or at least he assumed the word was on one of the flyers. It was hard to tell. Smack in the middle of the wallpaper of Fazbear flyers, the word was scrawled by all the other overlapped leaflets, but it commanded attention. In bold black lettering, the word was murder. Mike immediately strode the side of the building and started peeling away flyers. He ripped one after the other off the wall until he revealed the whole of the flyer within the black lettering. Once he had it under cover, Mark tore the flyer off the title. Tattered and damp, the flyer was limp, but it was intact. Mike could now see in the silvery moonlight. It's a full message. Freddy's is murder. Want to know more? 555 212 3947.